So nothing is going to change. The patient is going to remain the same. Doctor is going to remain the same. Prescriptions are going to remain the same. Everything is going to be the same. Only thing is we are going to use digital means to achieve those things. So that's a fundamental difference, and actually it is going to improve all three parameters of health services delivery. These three parameters are: one is essentially access, so the access must increase, and then second is affordability, and third is quality. So let me just explain to you in a little detail as to why and how all these three parameters will be positively impacted. So one is that India has a huge digital infrastructure in place today. Today we have 1.18 billion mobile connections. We have 800 million plus internet connections. We have 600 million plus smartphones. And we have the world's cheapest data rate. We have the highest data consumption in the whole world, 12 GB per person per month. And today people are watching films on mobile. India should be the only country where people are watching films. People are talking, our talk rates. Of course, Indians are famous for talking, argumentative Indian and all that. But we are actually talking individuals around 600 minutes per month per individual, which is again the highest in the world. So we have a digital infra in place. That is what will enable the delivery of various services. With that being the case, you can now take the health delivery using this communication infrastructure to the villages. So it improves accessibility. Now, a person, ultimately health service delivery has many facets. The last facet is hospitalization, the last phase, so to say. Before that, you consult a doctor, you get the tests done, you get the prescriptions made, you get the medicines, and you take medicines at home. And thereafter, this is the finally stage. If nothing works, then, you are hospitalized. Now, almost every process before hospitalization can be done digitally. So you can consult people using this telecommunication infrastructure. You can have digital consultations. And these consultations can be organized in remote rural areas, therefore improves the accessibility of the healthcare services. It also improves affordability because the patients doesn't have to travel, they don't have to take dharmsalas and hire people and hire spaces, transport cost, etc. That will reduce. So basically it reduces the cost, it makes it more affordable. Thirdly, because everything is so digital and so transparent and recorded, and so much the digital prescriptions will be digital, so everything is actually transparent, traceable. Responsibility is very clearly laid out, and therefore it also becomes better quality healthcare in the sense of those services which are delivered digitally. I'm not talking about that it improves the quality healthcare of the ICU in the hospital. That may also be benefited by the ICTs. That's a different issue. But from a patient's perspective, it becomes ubiquitous, it becomes affordable, and it becomes quality. And that digital basically works as a gap, as an enabler for delivery of these services.
I think another part of digital, which is very important, is the data part of it. And I want to talk a little more about that. What digital can do is, because there is data, there is a life cycle context of patients, previous records, history, all of that coming together. There's huge power that is clearly in that. But there is a lot of concern around data privacy and risk and how that data will be or should be managed. What are your thoughts and views around that, and how do you think we'll evolve towards a fully secure, privacy protected kind of a system?
Well, thank you, Prashant. In fact, your question also reminds me of an issue which I had not mentioned in my previous intervention. This is essentially quality can be improved if you have a longitudinal health record with you. So basically, digital makes it possible that you can have access to your longitudinal health records, and the kind of systems which you put in place whereby only you can access your records. That system ensures both privacy of the data. At the same time, it also ensures that you are able to share these records wherever and with whomsoever you want to share it with. So let me just sort of take you to a different area of data privacy, which is obviously extremely important because privacy is a fundamental right as declared by our Honorable Supreme Court in Aadhaar case. And also let me share with you that Aadhaar, which was an artifact constructed in 2009-10, and which was examined, and at that time privacy was not such a big issue, and which was examined in year 2018, and at the same time it was declared that Aadhaar does not violate privacy. So you can imagine that the people who built Aadhaar, and I happen to be one of them certainly, and I was very lucky to be there. Now we had a concept called privacy by design, which means you incorporate privacy in every project. What we have constructed in the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, and which the Honorable Prime Minister launched on 27th of September last year. Now, essentially, it is based on consent-based system, which means that only patient who is the owner of the data will have right to share that data with whomsoever he or she wants to share. Now, that being the case, the privacy is preserved, number one. Number two, we have worked in what is called a federated architecture, which means that the project or any entity does not consolidate the data, does not aggregate the data, does not put the data in one place, because that becomes a single point of failure. But basically the data remains wherever it is, but then you have the links to that data so that it can be visualized at the time you want to share or you want to have a view of the data. So I think the privacy by design concept has been incorporated in the digital mission, and the government obviously is providing a platform whereby it becomes possible to have this kind of system which is interoperable, which is frugal, which is scalable, which is actually promotes startups, because it builds solutions, it leaves the solution building part onto the ecosystem partners. So that kind of architecture is being put in place.
What should we expect in 2022? What are the short-term objectives, and what do we see roll out?
One is that we will increase the scope and coverage of the Ayushman Bharat PMJY. That's one part, because we have been having the thus far the coverage has not gone to the 54 crore population. We have not reached out to all, which we will ensure that we reach out to them, and we actually make them aware, provide them cards, the small PVC cards, which actually become and empowering tokens with these people to show and to get the treatment. That's number one. Secondly, the digital mission is going to become a very, very transformational mission. We think that it has the potential of becoming transformational, but whether it will become transformational or not will depend on the ecosystem partners, because ultimately government can also only create platforms, can only create a framework. Ultimately, it is for everybody coming together which will make it happen. So, for example, more and more digitization in the health sector takes place. More and more records become digital. More and more prescriptions become digital. To that extent, the people start getting benefited out of that. We are able to have better diagnosis. We can have AI and machine learning platforms being hosted as software as service or our framework, which will basically means that doctor can also have second opinions from the expert systems. Those kinds of things, there are huge potentialities where we will leverage technology fully. And let me tell you, India has been a path breaker. India has done leapfrogging in technology. COVID is an example. COVID is a recent example which has been put in place. And actually, we didn't spend much money in doing COVID. It was only good, thoughtful design which actually made it such a success, which made it so inclusive. So therefore, India has shown to the world that we do not have many legacy systems, and that is a great advantage with us. And we will be able to create interoperable systems, frugal systems, speedy systems, scalable systems, which will ensure that we can actually leverage digital to a very large extent, and especially health delivery system.
When you create a team virtually of real life players, but they don't give you points based on a simulation. They only score points based on the real life performance in a real match that's upcoming. And then you compete with others to showcase your knowledge and say that, you know what, I actually know sports better than you. Because before today's match, I was able to pick a team that scored more points than your team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of confusion on like fantasy sports and gaming. There's no actual gaming in fantasy sports, right? You pick a team and then you're done. There's no.
It's a team selection
It's a
activity.
team selection activity, right? It is still a game of skill, but there's no virtual gaming. There's no simulation.
There's
And
no
therefore-
gameplay.
Correct. And therefore, no addiction. And therefore, it's also not available 24/7, right? If there's no sports matches going on, fantasy sports is not available.
Which,
So
by the way, as a segue for a brief minute, how does COVID impact your business directly? Because I assume
it completely.
some of the matches will not happen.
Absolutely. Like even Big Bash is going on right now. A couple of matches have been abandoned due to COVID. There was a couple of India series here and there that have been moved around, changed, or abandoned because of COVID. The South Africa series right now has been revised, right? The T20s were knocked out. So there's a lot of impact on fantasy sports because it relies on real sports.
Right.
Gaming, on the other hand, is kind of opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Gaming boomed during COVID because everyone was sitting at home and virtual and simulation, and you can play anytime.
Right.
So fantasy sports is not gaming, but it is a game of skill, just the way cricket or football is a game, right? And I think it's also important to understand the legality, right? The Supreme Court has, for once and for all, said that the format offered by Dream11 and approved by basically the Federation of Indian Fantasy Sports, which is the self-regulatory body for fantasy sports in India, that charter is approved and this case has reached finality. It is no longer res integra. And so this case cannot be discussed again and again about the legality. What's also happening is that people are broadly, mischievously using that and launching formats akin to gambling, in my opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And saying, oh, this is also fantasy cricket. And so we are actually hoping that we are working with the government to be a little stricter on exactly what is allowed, what is not allowed by the court. I think this last year, the fantasy sports industry, which consists of over 200 companies in India,
Wow.
has now contributed about 3,000 crores in media rights, in advertising on media properties,
Yeah.
in sponsoring teams, leagues, players, and spending money on every single sports event whatsoever, right?
Mm.
Along with that, Dream11, I can say at least, has a Dream Sports Foundation, where we also support about 6,000 athletes in India today.
Right.
And so there's also that CSR part, right? So I think fantasy sports is showing that it can really become one of the largest contributors in terms of engagement, viewership, and commercialization.
I think that entrepreneurs need an unhealthy dose of confidence to make it through the journey. And they need this sort of naive, come what may, but I'm going to be, heads down, gung-ho about my business, about my idea. And I think you really, really need that to make an idea succeed. I was telling you even when we caught up earlier that the first 3 years at Nykaa were miserable. And that's something most people don't know, particularly when you look at the outcome today. But I mean, it is a complete uphill battle to build any startup. And that's, regardless of what the outcome is, from investors saying no to running out of cash to not being able to retain your management team to degrowth, not being able to hit your numbers, to ERP failing and this system not working and customer complaints and website crashing, app crashing. We've gone through all of that. And I think the sheer fact is that you need to be insanely thick-skinned and very optimistic and kind of confident to continue with that journey. And so that's something I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs who might be listening will probably relate to. I think in terms of why beauty, why fashion, when we were starting the business, we actually looked around and tried to, we weren't like, very passionate about beauty or fashion. It didn't come from a passion for the category. My mom, Falguni Nayar, who's the CEO and founder, she had a long career as an investment banker. And I had just graduated undergrad and just returned to India to, work with her. And we just studied businesses. So we studied a whole host of types of businesses. We read a lot of research reports. And we honed in on 3 ideas. One was this beauty business. One was, a little bit more like a Airbnb type model where we were, renting out holiday homes. And a third was something related to old age, services and whatnot. And it was literally like studying 3 different ideas, 3 different business models, and eventually honed in on beauty. Read a lot of research reports that made us feel confident in beauty. Beauty is a high margin business. It's one of the highest margin, categories out there. Number 2, the product does well both online and offline. There was some research we read back then that showed that in the US, after Apple and Tiffany's, Sephora actually had the highest sales per square foot. It also felt like a category that other bigger, deeper pocketed competition was not looking at. The existing competition then was looking at electronics, was looking at books, and was looking at not home, but fashion. But no one was really looking at beauty. So it felt like a bit of an overseen category. So that's how we kind of picked beauty. And I don't think then, when we go back to our notes, then we never could have imagined that it would be doing the sales that it was doing today. I think the last thing I'll say, because you said what could be some advice as others think about what business start. I think no matter what vertical or what type of business you pick, from day one, we had a business model in mind. We had actually built out a P&L in terms of what the P&L needs to look like year 1, year 2, year 3. What margin structure do we need to strive for? What cost structure? Which year will we be profitable? And these are goals and targets that we really held ourselves to. So I think that's one thing that's how we build our businesses, is to really have a strong P&L understanding before we even get into it.
Yeah, and you're lucky that you've been able to do that. I think the biggest point that you kind of picked up is a very high margin category, and probably your research showed that even in developed markets like US, a company like Sephora was doing higher sales. I think research and high margin is, I think I can take back, and your competition wasn't focused on that. Tell me one thing: did you have a tech co-founder early on?
No, we did not.
Okay. And I want to ask you this actually. Let's say even today, when a lot of entrepreneurs who are business first entrepreneurs would come to us and want to do a technology business, we'd say, what, you can't do this without having a tech co-founder. And if you look back, I would say all 3 co-founders in the family business are business first entrepreneurs, right? I mean, non-technology. How did you manage to sail through that? And was there a question that was asked a lot of times? And how did you manage that?
Yeah, I think I think we regret not having a strong technology person with us from day one. So to be honest, in the early days, it was my brother hadn't joined the business yet. It was just me and my mom, and we brought a good management team in. So we had a strong CBO, COO, CMO, and even a CTO. The problem is that the CTO just couldn't stick. So we went through some 3 or 4 CTOs in the first 3 years. And then finally in our 4th and 5th year, we found our CTO who is with us till today. And he's fantastic. And he's been with us for 5, 6 years, and he's given us that stability. But I think, I think the business could have been far stronger and far further ahead if we'd had him from day one. So we regret not having him from day one, but I don't think there's any hard or fast rule. I think businesses can be built with or without technical co-founders. But yes, having a strong tech, foundation is so critical. And we regret it, and I think it's one of our big misses.